but when I was hosting.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Yeah. Thank you. Welcome back. That's right. So, yes, where we were, we are in the middle of talking about the 5 aggregates, right? No, sorry, the 3 marks of existence, where we happen to say that existence is all often understood in light of personal experience in Buddhism. So every time you talk about your existence and your whole point of reference is your experience, past, present, or future. Future, now there's nothing called future experience, but whatever by the time all your dreams, targets, ambitions, expectations, and the goals that you have set, and then they are called the future experience, that which is yet to become experience. So that always we understand our existence in terms of our past memories, and which is also experience, and then what we are going through right now, which is our present experience. So that's called past experience, and then experience in the making. And then the future is called experience yet to be made. So that's how Buddhism describes existence: past experience, experience in the making, which is you are going through, and then experience yet to be made. So it's all together. We call this dynamics experience. And then the last and seventh question is about second noble truth. Now, the second noble truth is, and you know the 4 noble truths. And of course, in class, previously we talked about, we understood the 4 noble truths, or even though you call them 4 noble truths in the plural, but actually there's only one truth. So that's why it's also correct to say fourfold noble truth. One truth, it has 4 areas. So that, but given the Pali term, so the 4 noble truths are 4 noble truths is a direct literal translation of the Pali term chattari. So chattari ariya sacchani. Chattari ariya sacchani. That's the plural. That means 4 noble truths. Chattari is 4. Ariya is noble. Sacchani in plural. So that I mean 4 noble truths. And elsewhere you come up this word. So that's chatu ariya sacca. The fourfold noble truth. And then, yeah, I was going to say that in one of our previous sessions, we happened to, revisit the 4 noble truths in terms of what's called problem and solution. Problem and solution. The first 2 truths represents the problem, and the last 2 truths represent the solution. Problem and the solution. So the problem has 2 aspects again. What is the problem? That is all about the first truth. Dukkha itself is the problem. And then, so that's the problem. And then, unless the problem is properly understood, it would be very difficult to have a solution. So that is why, in the Buddhist analysis of 4 noble truths, first the problem itself is described, and then the reason behind, or the cause behind the problem is discussed. So the second truth is all about it's about the reason or the cause or the multiple causes behind the problem, or the cause of the problem, just to say properly. And then first truth is the truth of dukkha, or dukkha itself is the problem. And then we need to understand what created that problem. And that's all about the second truth, helps us to understand what the cause of the truth, the problem. And then the solution. The last two truths, that's mean the third one is the truth of the Noble Eightfold Path. The truth of the cessation, the truth of ending, putting an end to the problem, dukkha. That is the third truth. And the last one is the solution, how to say the remedy. And then, so that is the solution is first solution is determined. Now again, dukkha is the problem itself. And then we need to understand the reason behind our problem. That is the second truth is all about. And then we need a solution. And first we determine the kind of solution that we need. And then we need the whole process. And that's so the remedy is the solution. But it's not that easy to have the remedy for the problem, the solution for the problem. But we need to have the prescription, or we need to an action plan. And that action plan is the last truth, last and fourth truth, that is the noble, the truth of the Noble Eightfold Path. In short, we got the suffering itself, and what makes suffering, what creates suffering, and then the solution, which is nirvana, and then the path or the action plan with regard to the solution, that is nirvana. Now here, now we're going to discuss the second noble truth, that is the truth of, excuse me, sorry about that. Truth of the truth of dukkha. Now this is called samudaya. Let me go through the whole list in Pali as well. First is dukkha. These are the standard Pali canonical terms that we use to identify the different truths. First truth is dukkha. Second one is samudaya. Third one is nirodha. Fourth one is magga. So that dukkha, we define that multiple times, and samudaya, that's the term that we need to touch or elaborate on here. Samudaya is called sam plus udaya. Udaya is arising due to sang means the reason. So arising of dukkha. So samudaya means there are different some prefix some here represents lobha, that is desire, and then dosa, that is anger, and moha, that is delusion or ignorance. So now sang, prefix sang, sang means together. A few reasons together leads to the arising of the truth, dukkha. That's what samudaya means. Sang plus udaya, based on a few reasons, and then so that dukkha is created, and that's called samudaya. Samudaya is the truth of the origin of suffering. In English, that's the truth of the origin of dukkha. So then, yes, second truth is all about origin. What creates dukkha, and then it's tanha. Sorry, but I'm using double vowels, like two ways, because somehow my computer stopped helping me. I can't type diacritics anymore. I need to update something. So that tanha, trishna, Sanskrit, tanha, Pali. Now the whole reason behind dukkha is tanha, trishna. So that it is trishna, it is tanha that returns, that brings us suffering. As long as there is tanha or desire, we have to we have to encounter dukkha, suffering. Now in the Majjhima Nikaya, in Majjhima Nikaya, that's the middle length sayings of the Pali Canon, you come across these two words. I think we also discussed this one as well before. Pativiruddha. Anuruddha is so favoring and favoring and opposing, or loving and hating, or attachment and aversion. Now Anuruddha is favoring, loving, or attachment. Pativiruddha is opposing or hating or aversion. Now, if you come across a Buddhist definition of the inner struggle, or the inner perennial indefinite struggle that we as living beings go through, it is in light of this pair of words that we understand our inner struggle. So our inner struggle is all about attachment and aversion. So that, as you know, attachment is natural, and then so by nature attachments are natural. We automatically get attached to things. Remember the word that we discussed, satta or sattva, meaning being, living beings, sensual beings. Sattva. Sattva also literally means attachment. Now our identity is attachment. Now We are made of attachment. We have no survival without attachment. So it's all about attachment. Our conscious or subconscious reference to things, maybe our experience, our dreams, our goals, is all about attachment. So that we have set a goal means that we need to get something out of our goal, meaning it is out of attachment. And then whenever we explain our past experience, and then at times we have a negative, so that we feel sad about our past experience, or we are happy about our past experience. Why is that? Why we are sad whenever we talk about our past experience? That's because things did not happen the way we wanted them to happen. That's why we are sad. So at that point, it's again attachment. Unless there was attachment, we would not feel sad about our past experience. And needless to talk about the good experience. But again, good experience also may lead to the same eventuality of sadness. I think we happened to say, I think in one of our previous sessions, we did define the term sukha and dukkha. I think we did that like 2, 3, 4 times. So that ka means negative. So du means negative. Ka means no essence. And then su means positive. Ka means no essence. Finally, it could be dukkha or sukha. So both terms end with ka, suffix ka. Ka means negative. And then so du is, ka is essenceless, no essence, no substance, no essence. And then du is negative. And then that's about the dukkha, negative and essenceless. And what about the sukha? Sukha literally means happiness, joy. But again, su is positive. But we end up being negative again. Even that is sukha. Ka is no essence. So it could be dukkha. No need to say that dukkha has no essence. I mean, dukkha has no value because we hate that anyway. But what if we look at sukha the same way we look at dukkha? Yes, it's the same. It's the same eventuality. For the moment, you are positive, and you are happy that you experience something good. It's not dukkha, then it's sukha. But what happens then? Moments later, you are back in, and then you are worried. Why? Because you can't. Then you cannot retain sukha forever, and it disappears too. And then again, so that right after the happy feeling pops up another feeling that represents dukkha. So that's the etymologically du plus ka, su plus ka. Ka, no essence. At that point, ka, the suffix ka, corresponds to anatta. Anatta means everything, nothing would contain a substance. There's no that, so nothing. So that nothing has a permanent value. You can so the nothing contains a permanent value. So that always there's a temporary value. The temporary value may come as built-in, but at the same time, most of the time, things have a built-in value to a certain extent. But the problem is not with the built-in value. It's always, the problem is with the attributed value. We attributed a higher degree of value, a higher degree of essence to the things that we experience. And then at times, we count our own assumptions or conclusions when we are no longer accept things that we have accepted, we had accepted, we used to accept. We reject the same thing. We reject our own acceptance. We reject our own conclusions. That's because the conclusions of value attribution that we had made no longer helps us to be happy. So that we go back on our own conclusions and we reject. And that's the typical nature of us human beings. And then if we expect every experience to be sukha, but when it doesn't happen in a world where even sukha finally takes us back to dukkha, and no need to say that dukkha gives us further dukkha, more dukkha. So at this point, this is about the inner struggle, and then you like something, you favor something, and then you embrace something, you hug something, and at the same time, after some time, it is the same you who are now rejecting, refusing, hating, running away from the very thing that you call yours, that you had embraced, that you had favored, that you had loved, so that you had hugged to your chest, to your heart. Now, so that is the end thing. So, and at times, I think I don't exactly remember where it occurs from, somewhere from a sutra. Now, someone is coming to the Buddha and asking a question. Now, he asked the Buddha this question: Gautama, that's Buddha's tribal name, Gautama, why do you only talk about impermanence and dukkha? Can't you talk about sukha? And Buddha says, yes, I do talk about dukkha. I do talk about sukha. Simply because I say there is sukha, there's nothing called sukha. I could say that there is sukha, there is happiness. But simply because I say that there is happiness or sukha, do you think that there is sukha, there is happiness? No. I'm not making up things. I'm just explaining the reality as it is. And that the very person who had that question, so that he didn't ask anymore. So, and then at times, we have to accept that time there's the problem of the application of certain teachings into our daily life. Dukkha is a reality. Both sukha and dukkha lead to dukkha, and that's a reality. But at times, what is wrong, if there is something wrong with dukkha, it is not with the dukkha itself, but the way we apply the teaching of dukkha into our daily life. For example, let's say you are starting a business. It's been weeks or months since you started a new business, new project, and you don't get the profit, the kind of that you expected. And at what times, and in case you try to make up everything is dukkha, so is my business. At that point, you are not making the good use of the teaching of dukkha. At that time, you are unnecessarily discouraging yourself. And you go extra miles to put the blame on astrology and karma, which I always say that bodhisattvas never do. They never get discouraged by dukkha in their existence. They never get overly confident of the sukha that they achieve, and they don't get discouraged by karma. Of course, there's no mention of astrology or stars and planets in the life of a bodhisattva at all, and they don't get discouraged by stars and planets or astrology. Whereas in our case, we easily happen to do that. We easily get discouraged by our own mindset. So at that point, because we happen to discourage ourselves because we are now applying the Buddha's teaching of dukkha at their own place. So that dukkha is a reality, but that doesn't mean that you are supposed to discourage yourself by putting the blame on astrology and karma and any negative karma, negative heat from. Yes, that That's right. Yeah, because so that at least I is asking this question: is it okay to use astronomy as a reference in terms of making some decision? Yeah, astronomy or astrology, right? So the astronomy is the science of stars and planets. Astrology is the same kind of spiritual kind of use of the astronomical realities in order for us to determine our luck, our fortune, unluck, and all that. So then Kim Karisanti Taraka. Now, in a certain dialogue that Buddha had with his audience, Buddha happened to say, King Karisanti Taraka, meaning, what can stars do in our existence? And that is meaning what implies, what Buddha implies by that statement is that we are not supposed to rely on stars and planets. But also when it comes to the Buddhist Vinaya, monastic code of conduct, and Buddha said that it's good if monastics and people know some astrology, the function of stars and planets, so that you would be able to have your fortnight, fortnight monastic gatherings, and then so that to someone who walks the spiritual path towards nirvana, may not use astronomical or astrological realities, because given the possibility that it could discourage them. But elsewhere, Buddha says it's good to know the astronomical realities or astrology. So that and then why is that's from Josh, everyone. Dukkha is a noble truth. Yes. Why is dukkha considered the noble truth? That's very thought-provoking. Dukkha itself is not noble, but the truth about dukkha is noble. Why? Why it is called the truth is noble? Because that is the first and foremost thing that we must realize, that we must know during our empirical existence. Otherwise, there's no way out of samsaric agony. Because for the simple reason that dukkha is the most important thing that we need to realize. It is the truth or the reality of that is considered noble. So that so that's why all about truth. Thank you for that, Josh. And dukkha is noble truth. Truth is noble. Why it is noble? Because that's what we must know essentially in our life. Otherwise, we wouldn't have way out of this whatever the samsaric agonies that we would otherwise encounter. So that's true. And then yes, astrological realities. Buddha talks about astrological realities, astronomical realities, cosmic realities, and all that. But to someone, so that astrology and astronomy, they have, and they are important. It's important to understand astronomy and astrology, given the fact that so that external or the cosmic energy can affect our well-being. But at the same time, to someone, that's again, so that astronomical realities are the biggest concern of scientists, whereas so that psychology is the biggest concern of the Buddha. Now, so that's why, as opposed to space travel, cosmic journeys, spirituality encourages us to have the inner journey, spiritual journey, because that's again, remember we happen to talk about the purpose of Albert Einstein and purpose of Buddha. Albert Einstein, father of the science, father of modern science, talked about physical universe. And of course, the other one of my favorite astrophysicist, the late astrophysicist Stephen Hawking. And then so that scientists talk about the physical universe. And Buddha talks about the energy or the inner universe, because his concern, the purpose of the Buddha appearing in the world, Buddha's teaching, purpose of the Buddha's teaching is to help us to end the cycle of suffering. And so that whereas the purpose of science is to, how to say, explore the physical universe, physical world, physical realities. And so at that point, that's where the difference is. And then so that Buddhas never appear to teach us science. If they do, it is the science of our mind. The only science is in the spiritual. The only science is that there is this universal perennial problem of dukkha, and then as long as you don't understand dukkha, you wouldn't be able to achieve salvation. So that thanks to dukkha, thanks to understanding of dukkha, you can achieve the biggest thing in the universe, that is nirvana, salvation. So that's why, as George put it, it's a noble truth. Dukkha is it's a noble truth. And then here, tanha, trishna again, and we were talking about the inner struggle, the samsaric struggle. That is all about our favoring. Whatever we used to love, we hate now. Whatever we used to run after like crazy, we are now running away from it. So it's all about, it could be as simple as a date, or it could be as simple as eating a certain food that you had been waiting to taste. It could be as complex as a relationship, and all the realities. It could be simple feelings. It could be a relationship. It could be a social movement. It could be a revolution. It could be politics. Anything. Anything. Any life experience. Any life situation could be give us an, how to say, ample understanding of the inner struggle that we all go through, favoring and opposing, attachment and aversion. Now, why the second noble truth? Why understanding of tanha, trishna, or attachment is noble? Because that is the more important part of the problem. Because the first truth is all about dukkha itself. But then, unless you know what created the problem, you wouldn't be able to have the solution for the problem. That's why always the second truth is more important than the first truth. So that remember, whenever you are struggling with the problem, and in what always you understand, you revisit the problem, and you try to trace the very roots of the problem, and there you understand the conditions behind that, the cause or causes behind that, and the situations behind your problem. So that is all about the second truth. You identify the very root of the problem. So that by the time when you understand the root of the problem, or the cause, or the multiple causes of the problem, or the reason behind your problem, and due to that tracing, the understanding of the very root of the problem, you feel relieved. Instantaneously, you are happy. And for example, sometimes you know that let's say you are going through financial turbulence, financial problem. Of course, everyone does. And then so what happens is, for example, you get heavy credit card bills. It's very heavy on your budget, and it's way too much. And then when you collect some, when you go through some credit card statement that you got in the last 3-4 months, and then you identify that you had spent too much on certain items, certain things, And that's when, aha, now I understand why the interest is so high, why the bill is too high. And then when you say, aha, even though the problem is not resolved yet, but you happen to say, aha, meaning you have understood, you have realized the reason behind the credit card bills being much higher this time. See the psychology behind, the psychology of the second truth. Now you understand. Proper understanding of the very root of, or the very reason behind, or the very cause of the problem itself is already giving you some relief. It can motivate you towards embarking upon the solution. So that's why I thought that I should include a sample question here on about the second truth rather than the first truth or the third one or the fourth one, because this is all about tanha or trishna. And then you come back with this saying, tanha janeti. Tanha janeti puriso. This is a statement that Buddha made. Tanha is craving. Janeti creates. Puriso, man. Craving creates man. So Trishna, Tanha creates man. So we are made of Trishna. Again, that is attachment. Again, you can consider this statement in terms of sattva as well. As I said, sattva literally means attachment. Our identity is attachment. Our identity is craving, and so that it is attachment that created us. And this statement confirms the same. Tanha janeti puruso. It is attachment. It is tanha, craving, that creates man. Tanha janeti. Janeti means creates. So that's what creates us. And that's what the second truth is all about. The second is all about the tanha, our creation. We are created by our own craving, and we get recreated. And Buddha used this, how to say, average man and the golden rain of gold. Average man and the rain of gold. This is a parable, like a parable. This is like an analogy. I think I did share that. Let me narrate it again in case some of you missed that. Of course, some of you did miss you on vacation. And I said that. So, let's say average means extremely greedy man. And so that now he's standing in the front yard of his property. And all of a sudden, the sky is turning into something very unusual. It's going to rain, and to his utter surprise, all of a sudden it starts raining, so the rainfall is not a rainfall of water. It's the rain of gold, and all of a sudden it is a continuous how to say rain of gold coming down from the sky, and so they fill in his backyard, and then soon it would cover the entire neighborhood. And now his backyard and front yard is full of gold from the sky. And then he has a big house. What he's by himself. What he does, he would shovel gold inside into his house from the backyard and the front yard, and then he would pick each and every piece of gold that is within his property. And then now his house is full of gold. And then and then what happens is, now he sees gold scattered in the street and on his neighbors' properties as well. And there is lots of difficulty. And then he would put his he would also grab some pieces from other people's properties, some gold. Even if now he's so full of gold, he's not happy. He still wants to grab the gold from other people's properties as well, from the street. And there's no way he can even get into his house now. And that's when Buddha says, Na kaha pana vassena tithi kamesu vijjati. This is a statement that Buddha made with regard to the second truth. Na kahapana. Kahapana means, kahapana is golden coins. Vassena. Vassena means vassa. So kahapana means gold coins, golden coins. This was a monetary unit that was used in ancient times. Well, it could be gold, it could be golden coins raining down from the sky. And then kahapana. Vassa is rain. Vassena means by rain. So that tithi. Tithi means satisfaction. Tithi. Vijjati means there is no. There is no. Na vijjati means there is no. Even a heavy rain of gold or golden coins would still fail to satisfy man. Now that is the translation. Even so, the man is not happy even with the even with the rain of gold, or even a heavy rain of gold would still fail to satisfy man, or even a man is not satisfied even with the heavy rain of gold from the sky. So now, so that's how Buddha explains. That's how Buddha explains the limitlessness of man's craving, tanha, or trishna. And then, but this is the overall nature of human mind, or the craving. So that even if the statement should not discourage you to earn more wealth, but actually you have a freedom, you have a right to earn wealth as long as you don't cause any harm to anyone else. Of course, that it is also impossible, even the highly consumeristic societies. So that when you market something, of course you have to lie, you have to promote certain products, and of course you have to lie, and then so that's how you go with the profit making. That's how you make profit. That's one thing. But overall, here Buddha is talking about the nature of the human mind, not about the properties or the businesses that you run, that you make the profit out of. But this is the nature of our human mind. So the nature of our mind is such that it is always driven by limitless craving. And also tanha. Now you know that what is the root cause of our suffering? That is tanha, or trishna. In the Dhammapada, Buddha says tan haya jayati soko. Tanhaya jayati soko. Sorrow arises from tanha. Sorrow arises from craving. Tanhaya jayati soko. And then not only sorrow, and then it's also tanhaya jayati Bhayang. Bhayang means fear. From tanha arises fear. So in our day-to-day life, there are two things that arise from our tanha. That is, how to say, sorrow and fear. These are the two things that these are the sorrow and fear are the immediate outcome of our, how to say, our trishna or tanha, after some enjoyment, I would like to say. Now, of course, tanha gives you some temporary relief. Relief means some satisfaction. But then what happens? If you happen to say, in most cases, having enjoyed something, then you happen to say, tell yourself, so what? When you say, so what? Meaning not happy. Unless you repeat the same action, or unless you revisit your fond memories of your past experience, you are not happy. At times you never get to experience what you just once experienced something in the past. At that point, there's no way that you re-experience the same thing. The only resort to happiness at that point is that so then you rely on your fond memories of your past experience. Yes, Sharon, yeah. Depending on tanha, trishna for knowledge. Yes, of course, yeah, that's right. So remember that we talked about two words, so that jnana and panya. So that's, I'm just answering the Sharon's question. I think that's quite relevant here. So the jnana is knowing, knowledge. Panya we did discuss, I think, yesterday, right? 3 words. So sanya, vinyana, the panya, jnana. Jnana is knowledge. It is typical, how to say, knowledge. Any knowledge. It could be a professional knowledge, educational knowledge, even some specific psychic knowledge is called jnana. Now, whereas when it comes to our practice, it is really what is called panya that we need to achieve. So in pursuit of how to salvation in our spiritual practice, it is panya and not jnana. Jnana is Sanskrit. Jnana is Pali. That should be our concern. Now, interestingly, when you achieve certain psychic abilities, for example, meditative absorption, so dhyana, so jhana, so chan, right? Dhyana Sanskrit, dhyan Hindi, jhana Pali, chan Chinese, Zen Japanese. So it comes from even Zen and Chan, they come from with the very Sanskrit called dhyan, meaning meditative absorptions. Even psychic, different kinds of psychic knowledges below nirvana are considered jnana or knowledge. Jnana or knowledge. Whereas if we are really focused on, when we are focused on our practice, spiritual practice, it is really panya that must concern us. Panya is the unbiased knowledge as we define multiple times, not jnana. And then you can better understand this one in terms of the psychic knowledge that Devadatta had. Right? Devadatta, the monk who tried to murder the Buddha by, felling a huge piece of rock on him when he was when Buddha was doing chankamana, or doing his walking meditation underneath at the foot of a huge rocky mountain. And that's when and then Devadatta himself had jhanas, dhyana or jhana. That means psychic ability. It is with this psychic knowledge that he could tempt, he could tempt Ajatasattu, the king Ajatasattu, Ajatasatta, Ajasatta. There are different pronunciations, so that's okay. King Ajatasattu, and then so that Devadatta, the monk, would go to Ajatasattu's palace, and then sometimes in order to terrorize, and he would terrorize the king. He would frighten the king by changing himself into a snake, a cobra, and then landing himself on king's lap, and then the king would be scared to death. Now that is his psychic ability, psychic knowledge. So that's why even any knowledge, any piece of knowledge, any area of knowledge other than nirvana is identified with jnana or knowledge. Whereas in spiritual practice, it is not jnana, knowledge, but panya, wisdom. That should be our goal. So Sharan, that's I could say. Now, that being said, so let's see then tanha, trishna. So then it is in our spiritual practice, what we are supposed to pay most attention of the first two truths is the second one, tanha. In our day-to-day practice, as part of the spiritual practice, it is tanha that we need to gradually reduce. So the gradual reduction, what is recommended is the gradual reduction of tanha. So that unless the tanha is reduced, gradually reduced, so that the more you reduce tanha, you are a few more steps closer to nirvana. Why? Because that's the only building block to salvation, craving. Why again tanha is dangerous, so dreadful? Because it can be a trap very easily. So that and then sometimes you are unrealistically attached to something, and then so that so given those two words again, anuruddha and pativiruddha, the inner struggle, favoring and opposing, and then in English you come up with these two words, phobia, mania and phobia. Mania and phobia. When your attachment is unrealistically high, when your attachment is incredibly high, and so that you could get into trouble, and because you are maniac, so it is the mania. And then so that those who encounter mania, the next thing they would encounter after mania is phobia. So that sometimes, so the manic behavior and phobic behavior are the two sides of the same coin, which is the extreme indulgence, extreme attachment. The higher the level of attachment, the higher the degree of attachment, the gravity of attachment, and then so that the higher the gravity of fear as well. So that is why it's always recommended to have. And oftentimes I am asked this question, is tanha good or bad? It's very difficult to answer that question. There are two different answers. To a monastic or someone who is fully dedicated to walking the spiritual path, tanha is negative, tanha is not good. To someone like a lay person running a business, getting educated, gathering knowledge, acquiring knowledge, professional knowledge, academic knowledge, and so on and so forth, and trying to, so that at that point, attachment is good. By nature, so the naturally, attachments are natural. That would be the Buddha's, the answer that Buddha was often give when he's asked if attachments are good or bad. When it comes to a spiritual practice, now attachments are detrimental to our progress. And so that, but you still need to survive. So that's why when Buddha formed the Sangha, when he created the community of monks, the monastics, and then so that he recommended that monastics have minimal attachment. At that point, it's not the minimal attachment actually, minimal comfort in their life. So that minimal comfort rather than attachment, because in order for the whole point here is, and you need the basis, you need the material grounds even for your spiritual progress. When you are penniless, when you are homeless, when there's nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and no access to Medicare and all that, and you are left out, socially left out, you are almost like a social outcast. So how could you do a practice? You need that. So that's why Buddha saw the middle grounds and recommended that monastics rely on lay people for minimal comfort, because they need to survive. And that's in the case of monastics. But whereas in the case of lay people living a worldly life, maintaining a family, raising children, and all that, so that they need to use tanha to a greater extent. But in both cases, so that the limits of your tanha must be ethical and legal, right? Now, for example, you can make money and at the same time never file for tax, and you evade taxation, you evade tax. Then what happens? So that evasion of tax is like murder, right? And so that the authorities would come after you, and you can get a jail time as well, and the system can confiscate your property and as well. So at the same time, so that's a legal boundary. So that's a legal boundary of attachment, tanha. And then actually not tanha. What brings you back? What tanha gives you back? What attachment gives you? Of course, that is the gathering or the collection of wealth. You collect wealth, you gather wealth. So that is why tanha is there, attachment. But as a lay person, you must see the limits of your attachment, and those limits are again essentially legal and moral. And then so that the legal, even if it is not illegal to acquire, because now in certain countries, of course, when you go to 18th century Europe, so that you saw that how the king and his assailants and his local leaders, authorities, how they plundered, how they robbed poor peasant farmers of their harvest, and then how they raped their wives and daughters, and then so that how they stole everything, how they rob the poor farmers of everything. And at that point, given that timeline, and then so that it wasn't deemed illegal, unlawful. Why? So that was the way. But again, it wasn't in the eyes of the 18th century European legal system, and then the king or the local ruler could very easily absolve a criminal of his wrongdoing in case so he gets sided with the ruler or the king. But it is unlawful still. But again, even if it's not considered illegal or unlawful, it is universally immoral, because nobody is supposed to grab someone is not supposed to grab someone else's property, and that amounts to what is called theft or stealing. So that's why there are, when it comes to how to say using your attachment, the natural instinct of attachment, natural instinct of tanha, what you have to be watchful of is the legal and moral boundaries of your attachment. And in the case of spiritual practice, because so the application, so the use of attachment or the degree of attachment that you are supposed to use is very minimal. Minimal to the extent that if you are a monastic, that you simply rely on, you live a life of simplicity. You simply have minimal comfort in order for your spiritual survival. And then, so in the case of lay people, you have more freedom to do that. So that being said, any questions about the Four Noble Truths? So the Noble Truth, second Noble Truth, Tanha, Trishna. So you can, in case you happen to answer a question about the second truth, and simply define, simply elaborate on the mindset or the nature of our mind, how it automatically get attached to things, so that how human beings easily forget. Yeah, it's correct, Franz. Yeah. Tanhaya jayati soko tanhaya. Yeah. Tanhaya jayati bhayang. So yes, tanhaya jayati soko. Tanhaya is the possessive case, grammatically. Possessive case. Probably you learn Pali, right? You conjugate nouns with Venerable Kusala, right? Tanhaya, out of, by dint of, by the reason. Tanha, out of tanha arises fear. Yes, out of tanha arises sorrow and fear. And then so that you can use some of those in order to explain tanha, trishna, in case you happen to answer certain questions, a question about the second truth, and you may those common common ideas of Buddhist idea of common definitions of tanha, and then how far, why tanha continually gives you sorrow and fear. So that why? Because the tanha has no limit; it's limitless. Unless you control it, you will very soon end up in the red zone of favoring or attachment. The red zone of attachment is called mania, and in the red zone of fear is called phobia. So you can very easily relate attachment to, how to say, sorrow. So this one, attachment and sorry, I lost in my words. So that the fear, sorrow and fear, and you can look at tanha in terms of sorrow and fear. That is the outcome. The outcome of tanha, trishna, is sorrow and fear, according to the Dhammapada verse. And then so that why you are sorrowful? Because you fail to get something that you wanted, that you expected. So you are sorrowful, you lament. And then why fear? At the same time, you feel insecurity. And then so that in case you are even scared to try again. And so that always sorrow and fear go in hand. It goes together, tanha. So anything else? Because after break I'm planning to discuss another additional essay. I mean, reading on mind, on our human mind, because so afterwards, any questions about this? We have like 7 minutes before our 15 minutes break. We'll take a break at 2:45, 15 minutes break, and we'll come back at anything missing, something you want to know about this? Because so after break, we would not touch on the sample questions again, probably, and we are not going to discuss the sample questions again, never, not even next month. So I kindly want you to start formulating answers for these sample questions, so that then you can save time that otherwise you would have to use the last minute, because I know you're all working professionals and maybe you work from home, and so somehow you are busy with a lot of things, so that I want you to start answering these questions, so that it will help you to easily answer mock exam questions and then the final exam questions. So when you read, and please read Venerable Rahula's textbook, I mean book, What the Buddha Taught, with these questions in your mind. So that every time when you read the book slowly, with the printout of these questions on the side, on one side, so that when you slowly go through the book, and then at the same time, or you can read the textbook with these questions in your mind, because I think probably you will have to, even if you have read the textbook for once or few times, I think you need to first study these questions and read the textbooks once again, so that think that when you answer these sample questions, so that imagine yourself answering the actual exam questions. Now, so that would help. And then also watch the length. Watch the length of your questions also. Right? So usually, when it comes to good answers, right? Because probably you have more experience than I do in terms of academic, answering academic questions, right? Is always answer is rich, not lengthwise, but content-wise, right? So based on the content of the answer, so it becomes a satisfactory answer or not. And then sometimes even if you provide a longer answer, but you may get lower marks grade, because why? Because the answer, even the answer is long, it doesn't have any substance in it. So that even if the answer is concise, as long as it is rich in terms of the content, and then you get full marks. So that's why I really want you to answer these questions, if not few times, so that in case you answer these questions, you are welcome to call me. I know that in the past you you had difficulty getting hold of me, because I was in Sri Lanka and I was sick, in and out of the hospital for like 11 times. But this time I'm available. You can call me, especially I'm available after 8 p.m. 8 p.m. to 12 midnight. So that, because as a counselor, I run this helpline for people who call me for counseling. So I keep myself awake until midnight. So you know my phone number, right? So that's 323-443-4040. Probably you can get hold of me on WhatsApp more easily than on my phone line. So that you're also welcome to discuss these sample questions halfway through answering, because I really want you to prepare yourself for the sample questions. That being said, what time is it now? Yeah, okay, 42 minutes. Any last questions about the sample questions, please, my friends? Probably your questions may get me directed on, get me on a different direction also. Anything missing? Anything you want to know? No, I guess, right?
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. It may be relevant, maybe slightly a little bit out of the bounds as well, but Vinayana being the imprints in the subliminal consciousness, as you had explained before, is carried forward for one. Say that's how it was explained when you were comparing soul versus subliminal consciousness. What is Pali's canon's guidance on such imprints like karmic, memory, or habitual being carried forward to one's progeny or children?
Yeah, actually, I noticed that question in your text messages as well. I was thinking to answer that later on. Anyway, we have a few minutes left. Thank you for asking me that. So it's about the canonical terms or descriptions as regards that, or
there is a lot of we talk about different forms of birth, and those are physiological mechanisms. But there is a lot of interest in understanding the impressions. Do people inherit the impressions as well?
Okay.
And I know Buddhist canons has referred to such topics or touched on these topics, and I thought I'll ask you that if there's an insight,
Yeah. Now, in the Buddhist Abhidhamma Pitaka, the basket of psychology, we come across these 7 universal, like genetic karma. Yes, that's genetic karma. Yes. See the passa. See that underneath my phone number, passa is touch. That means how to say contact. Contact between passa is contact, vedana is sensation, sanya is perception, chetana is intention, jivitindriya is life force that is given by karma, and manasikara the ability to memorize. Now these so these 7 tendencies are called the 7 universal tendencies. Phassa. It is with the mental tendency of phassa that the eye can see images. The sense faculties can see sense objects. It is with vedana or sensation that you can feel experience. It is with because of sanya or perception that you continually remain continually interconnected with the world, and then chetana is intention. That is how you do things in your life based on intention. Jivitindriya, the kind of life force. Life force means our ayu or our lifespan. That's also partially made by karma. And manasikara is to the ability to memorize things. So these are called the 7 universal tendencies of the mind. These seven together nurture what is called the subliminal mind. So these are the canonical terms that we use to describe how to say the function of the subliminal mind. So probably we will have another discussion at length in the middle of next week also, so that we can have a personal chat on that. Sharon?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, let's have. And we will revisit these terms and we'll have a longer discussion. Okay, thank you, and get back at in 15 minutes. Thank you. This time 15 minutes was much faster than 2 seconds. So then, in addition to the one and only textbook that we are using for this course, that is the Venerable Dr. Walpola Rahula's What the Buddha Taught, I would like to recommend this scholarly article on mind in Indian Buddhist philosophy. This is from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Personally, this is one of the best articles on mind in Buddhism that I have ever come across. So that we are not going to, because it contains 43 pages. Because simply, please read this article in your free time. I think I uploaded that. Why I chose this one is that because we are not using lots of textbooks, just like we did for the last course, the history of introduction to history of Buddhism. There also we had lots of textbook, but we didn't use much. But this time, while you stick to Dr. Rahula's book, and please make time to go through this article. We are not going to discuss the whole thing because it's a long one, 43 pages. We are going to skip most of the subtopics here, themes, and then areas, and we will just simply go through some of them. I just want you to pay your attention on how this SCP, that means Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy, defines the Pali term anatta. Where is that? Let me see. That's page 2. It's on page 2, 1.1. 101, the Not-Self Doctrine. Let's discuss that how the subtopic. See, in one of his earlier discourses, the Buddha declares that we ought to regard any form of sensation and consciousness, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, manifest or subtle, as it actually is. This is not mine. This is not myself. This is not what I am. This is from the Majjhima Nikaya. So that this rejection of permanent self, as the agent of sensory and mental activity, posed a significant challenge for the early Buddhists. Indeed, if there is no agent, That means kartru. Kartru in Sanskrit means agent, means that's in say. That means the doer, kartru. Kartru means one maker. And if action, karman. So the kartru, the agent, karman, they use the Sanskrit terms here. Karman is the action. The one who, the doer and his action. Doer of karma and the karma itself are merely transient events arising within a continuum of causally interconnected states. Then how is the efficacy of karma or rebirth to be explained? The whole point here is, because oftentimes, I think some of you also ask me, I used to ask my teachers as well, now if there is, while on the conventional level of dharma, and in both, there is both the doer of karma and the karma itself. But on the absolute level of teaching, how can there be karma when there is no doer of karma? Now, so this statement corresponds to that, the two levels of teachings. And historically, at least one Buddhist school, that of the Vatsya Putras or Pudgalavadins, personalists, does appear to endorse the reality of persons as conceived in reliance upon the collection of aggregates. I don't want to confuse, because this is the highly philosophical language, and also this is one of the in-depth articles that I have ever come across. But I really want you just to go through this, and then you can grab some ideas. Probably this would help you to clarify certain things that you missed, so that you already discussed in this class. So that now, I was going to say, okay, probably now, okay, let's go through the whole thing here. Now, see the title itself, the Not-Self Doctrine. We use No-Self Doctrine, but here it's called Not-Self Doctrine. That's the literal translation of anatta. So that Not-Self Doctrine. Also elsewhere you come up the term as No-Self Doctrine. Now, so that what happens is in Buddhism, so that this rejection of permanent self as the agent of sensory and mental activity poses a significant challenge for early Buddhists. Now, if and when there is no agent or there is no doer of action, so there's no way for karma to exist. Why? Before karma, there must be someone who commits karma, who makes karma, who gathers karma. That's what agent here means. That's called the doer. Doer of karma, when there is no pudgala. Pudgala means the person. If and when there is no person, when there is no individual, how can there be karma? So that based on that, how can there be rebirth? That is triggered by karma, and that would lead to the, how to say, many different other questions. Now, when it comes to, and so that posed a significant challenge for early Buddhists, meaning during the early history of Buddhism. And so that people would always get confused with the two levels of teaching. And so this article basically at this point under the Not-Self Doctrine corresponds to the two levels of teaching. Sammuti, or conventional truth, and Paramatta, absolute truth, or the ultimate truth that we discussed. Again, according to conventional truth, everything does exist. There is a doer of karma, so that there is karma done by that person. Whereas on the absolute level of karma, how can there be karma when there is no doer of that? How can there be karma when there is no agent of karma? I am the agent, and then my action as the agent produces karma. That's so the karutru and karman here. See, there is no agent. That's karutru, the Sanskrit word. Kartru is the doer, one who does. And the karman is the action that produces. So when there is no doer, no individual, how can there be karma? So that's when elsewhere, but and so that even though there's a clear canonical, let's say, clear canonical description of the two levels of teaching, I think you came across before in the previous coursework, so that remember Nayatta teachings and Nayatta teachings and Nitatta teachings. This is from the Anguttara Nikaya. From the Anguttara Nikaya, the Pali Canon. Now, Nayatta is the kind of teaching that further requires clarification or definition, meaning conventional teachings. Now, according to Nayatta teachings or conventional teachings, that is, or the teaching that is based on the conventional truth, there is a doer, there's an individual, there is a person, something, a reality called person, a reality called an individual like me, like you, and then so we do act, and then those actions with the involvement of intention produces karma. So on the conventional level of truth, there's no question whatsoever as to regarding the agent and the action, agent and his action. The actual question arises when you look at the individual or the person and the agent and his action that produces karma. Now that was the challenge, and the people would always mix up the two levels of teaching, and ask how can there be karma when there is no doer of karma at that point. And Buddha says, Tatha gatang abbha Tathagatang Abha Chikkati. Tathagatang means Buddha. There's no there is no more harmful way of misinterpreting the Buddha than when people say that if there is no doer of karma, how can there be karma? Now, so that's why Buddha clearly says in the Anguttara Nikaya, he warns against mixing up the two levels of teachings. But however, in the Buddhist philosophical traditions, and they would easily disregard, or maybe some philosophers, some scholars may not come across this Pali, so that this statement by the Buddha that occurs in the Anguttara Nikaya, that says that there's no more harmful way of misinterpreting the Buddha than mixing up Nayatta teaching, that misunderstanding or mistaking a Nayatta teaching as a Nitatta teaching and a Nitatta teaching as a Nayatta teaching. Nayatta teachings are the teachings, conventional teachings that further requires clarification and definition. Nitatta teachings are the teachings that requires no further clarification, no further definition. Always the Nitatta teachings are the teachings that Buddha has given based on the absolute or the ultimate level of truth. And then so that, for example, but even in conventional teachings, now there's no question whatsoever about the fact that in ultimate level of teachings, Buddha doesn't talk about individuality, persona, agent, Pudgala. But whereas the actual question arose since because you also come across absolute ultimate level of definition of truth in the teachings that are based on the conventional level of truth. For example, even in conventional truth, and Buddha would simply say there is no individual, there is no persona, there is no pudgala, but there is simply the five aggregates. So that paved the way for this problem here, the philosophical question here. That would put that would be pose a challenge to early Buddhists here. So that they say, indeed, if there is no agent, karutru, or if and if actions, karma, are merely transient events arising within a continuum of causally interconnected states. Please write it, jot that down. Please remember this term. Within a continuum of causally interconnected states. Now here, what is the continuum here? Now continuum here is the most subtle area of our consciousness. In certain translations, Bhavanga is translated as the mental continuum or the continuum of consciousness. The continuum is the smallest thing, just like a pen drive or a flash drive on which you save lots of data. You can save a whole library onto a flash drive or a pen drive. Likewise, within a continuum of causally connected states. Now the consciousness is there, and then the consciousness is connected. So it remains the essence of selfhood, and it is further projected onto the threshold level and the sensory level, and on the sensory level, so that the individual connects himself to the external world, so that the individuality could be as big as the universe. So at the same time, so this is within a continuum of causally interconnected states means. And then even our selfhood, our Atman, our selfhood is conditionally arising. It is relative. Selfhood is relative. So selfhood is made of relative causes and conditions. When those causes and conditions fall apart, and so that the individuality, persona, pudgalahood, or personhood disappears. Now, this was the philosophical question that early Buddhists has to face with. So then, how is the efficacy of karma or rebirth to be explained? See, that's the philosophical question. That was primarily due to mixing up or misinterpreting a Nayyatta teaching as a Nitatta, and Nitatta teaching as a Nayyatta. But even to this date, also people always struggle. At times, people struggle with that question: how can there be rebirth? Because when there is no individual who makes karma, because there should be the karma in order for a rebirth to take place. Then how can there be rebirth? Because there is no individual. So that you run back and forth these two levels of teachings and argue. Historically, at least one Buddhist school, that of the Vatsi Putras or Pudgalavadins, because you come across like 18, if I am correct, like in the history, you come across 18 mainstream schools of Buddhism. I purposely avoided including these schools of Buddhism in this coursework because it's too much. It makes too much sense, and I never want to get too. And I didn't include this in the previous course either, because that was simply the historical introduction. So the introduction to the history of Buddhism. So that actually this is a whole. Usually we talked about these 18 schools of Buddhism in the history of historical expansion or the philosophical expansion of Buddhism. Probably in a future coursework, we will happen to come up with these 18 schools of Buddhism. So anyway, now here the Pudgalavadins. Pudgalavadins are a school of Buddhism. They are translated into English called personalists. And that school of Buddhism did accept personhood, persons. Does appear to endorse the reality of persons as conceived in reliance upon the collection of aggregates. For detailed discussion, see, and Pudgalavadins primarily fundamentally discourage themselves to talk about the five aggregates. They would always start up the dialogue with the description, with the definition, with the confirmation of the existence of reality called Pudgala, or the personhood, selfhood. But in Pali Buddhism also, you do the same. But at the same time, what is confusing is that even in conventional Pali, the Pali sutras based on the conventional reality, conventional level of truth, and Buddha uses the five aggregates rather than the personhood. But again, the Buddha's idea was to encourage people to use the objective approach, deconstructive approach to their existence. That's the purpose. But in philosophy, and Buddha used that in an applied sense. But here, in philosophical arguments, so the application may not have, may or may not have how to say, adequate space within. So that's when this is a philosophical thing. So that the collection of aggregates. So the Pudgalavadins, so personalists believed, and they would put more priority, and they would put emphasis on personhood rather than the five aggregates. So disagreement among modern interpreters of the Not-Self Doctrine attests to the difficulty of providing a definitive account of this core aspect of Buddhist philosophy. Thus, the early Pali scholar Carolyn Reese Davids thought that the way Buddhists understood and used the term consciousness was not very different that the way Upanishadic philosophers talked about the self. Similarly, it's in Horner, I.B. Horner actually, Horner, and suggested that some canonical, by the way, Reese Davids, Horner are the earliest European scholars, European authorities on the Pali canon. And then so that they were among the first ones to translate the Pali canon into German first and then to English. So that and later there are other, even today, so that it was them and their junior contemporaries who found what is called the Pali Text Society London, PTS. Even today, if there is a Western, how to say, organizational authority over the Pali canon, it is the Pali Text Society London, PTS. Now they were the earliest PTS scholars, but now again, Pali canon is being translated into English again in simple language, especially of which Bhikkhu Bodhi, the American Theravada monk, who lived like 27, 28 years in Sri Lanka, and 8 years ago he returned to New York. He's originally from New Jersey. So that he's the one who is retranslating certain texts translated by Reese Davids and how to say, so I.B. Horner. But what Bhikkhu Bodhi is saying is that earliest European scholars had difficulty distinguishing between Hindu terminology and then Buddha's philosophical terminology. So that's why Bhikkhu Bodhi is retranslating certain. But anyway, this article is, I find this article fascinating because that says how this addresses a fundamental philosophical problem that early Buddhists encountered in distinguishing between Buddhist idea, Buddha's interpretation of Buddhist ideas and Upanishadic ideas. By the way, everyone knows Upanishads, right? In previous coursework, we discussed that the four how to say, four areas, four ages, four historical eras of so the Hindu religion, Vedic religion, the Vedic, and then Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishadic. And of the Upanishadic period, I love to read Upanishadic philosophy, because there are mutual borrowings, mutual philosophical borrowings between Upanishad and Buddhism, according to Indian scholars. While so that Upanishadic period predates Buddhism, but Upanishadic period continues to flourish even many centuries after Buddhism. And then so that whatever the post-Buddhist Upanishadic philosophers borrowed a lot from Buddhism again. At the same time, pre-Buddhist Upanishad had big impact on Buddhist teachings. And Buddha borrowed lots of terms from the Upanishadic philosophy, and he retranslated them. And at the same time, post-Buddhist Upanishads borrowed a lot from Buddha again. So that's the fascinating interconnection between Buddhist teachings, and Upanishadic philosophy. Now see, and this point, so see that suggested that some canon Upanishad peers talked about. Similarly, Horner suggested that some canonical passages, for example, in Anguttara Nikaya, you don't have to worry about the reference, exact reference, actually provide support for the notion of self as an unchanging witness, sakhi, sakshin, so that witness, in Pali, sakhi means witness, evidence. Sakshin is the Sanskrit word for view, also defended in recent philosophical reworking of the notion of witness consciousness by Miri al-Bahari, although he acknowledged the confusion generated by the tendency to attribute to early Buddhism something analogous to the Upanishadic doctrine of self. Edward Consey, I like Edward Consey's writings, and nonetheless asserted that one's true identity is that of an absolute, which he presumed to be none other than the Buddhist view of consciousness. Perhaps the most detailed attempt to support a two-tier understanding of the doctrine of no-self comes from Kamaleshwara Bhattacharya's, it's a good book, who forcibly argued that the denial of self in Buddhism most often targets common views such as those that associate the self with the psychophysical aggregates and not the metaphysical notion of self. Now, you see the idea clear here, but pardon the language here, right? It's a philosophical language. Now, what this para says is that even to this date, even Buddhists find it difficult to comprehend the Buddha's idea of personhood, simply because while Buddha denies the existence of a personhood or the person or individuality of Pudgala at the same time, and then he says that an individual has to go through samsara because he continually accumulate karma. Now again, these are two different teachings, and so the only way to avoid the trap is that whenever you come across a certain sutra or a teaching, and that's how I was taught when I was very young, as a young so when I studied textual analysis. Now that was one of the basic principles of Buddhist textual analysis. Whenever you analyze a text, the first thing you need to do is to see which level of truth the very text that you are reading represents or corresponds to. Now, regardless of that, and there has been, if there's one universal point of argument among different schools of Buddhism, was nothing but this idea of Puggalavada. Puggalavada in Pali or Pudgalavada. Now, what the translation according to the encyclopedia, this says this personalist. Personalist. So, based on the Buddha's the canonical conventional level of teaching, we can be personalist. But when you define the person selfhood based on the ultimate or the higher level of truth, we cannot hold a personalist idea. We have to use an anti-personalist or non-personalist idea, because on the absolute level of reality there's no person, and on the conventional level of truth there is the person. So that there's karma and any other realities afterwards, like karma, then the samsara, return, dukkha, and all that. The whole point here is, so in the case of Buddha's distinction between the distinction between the two levels of teaching that he talked about in Anguttara Nikaya's Neyatta, the conventional teaching that requires further clarification and definition, and Nitatta, the kind of teaching that requires no further clarification or definition. So that his purpose was, again, that mountain metaphor. Remember, we talked about the mountain analogy, that Buddha and you or I go to see the mountain the first time, and then I heard about this beautiful, formidable mountain. And then when Buddha and I walk to the mountain, and we are now standing at the foot of the mountain, and then so that I am excited to see the mountain the first time. And then when I asked Buddha, do you see the mountain? He would say yes. And then I asked, then why did you say, when I suggested to accompany me to the mountain, and then when I asked, why did you then say that there's no mountain to see? Well, and Buddha would smile and say to me, well, yes, I said that there's no mountain to see. Then why did you ask? But then when I suggested that the mountain is formidable and beautiful, why did you not in agreement? Why you say the mountain is beautiful? How can the mountain be beautiful? How can you talk about the beauty of the mountain when there is no mountain, Buddha? And that confused me, asking the Buddha. And Buddha would further smile and say, yes, there is this mountain which is beautiful, that looks beautiful to our eyes. At the same time, Upananda, there is no mountain whatsoever. And that further confuses me. Now at that point, so that is why Buddha has included, while he talked about two levels of teachings, Niyat and Nitatta, conventional and absolute, at the same time, he integrates the absolute teaching of non-existence of personhood, non-existence of Pudgala, non-existence of personalist idea into his conventional teachings. So that's why at the same time, you come across in the same area of the canon where Buddha says, there is no person, but simply there are the five aggregates. And at the same time, there is a person, and and he does karma. He makes karma, and as a result of karma, he continues to run through the samsara. And then again, so the purpose here is, if you see a kind of sutra or the discourse that stands in between, the conventional level of teaching and the absolute level of teaching, it is the Satipatthana Sutta, or the discourse on the four foundations of mindfulness. So, and that is the middle ground. That sutra bridges. There are certain discourses that bridge the two levels of truth, and Satipatthana Sutta being the first and foremost of them. So now feelings. Now, you talk in the Satipatthana Sutra, we talk about the physical body, and then we talk about the mind, and then so feeling, and then what happens is so that feeling objects, so what you grasp, the body, mind, feeling, and feeling objects mean the sensory objects. And then so the last level of truth, last level of the foundation includes consists the entire world. So all these four areas together, we come up with what Buddha does in his conventional teachings is that now, well, on the absolute level of teaching, he denied the existence of the agent called person, so that the question of karma does not appear, because there is simply the non-existence of persona, individuality. But that is the view of enlightened people, actually. So always the absolute level of truth is based on the vision of the enlightened people, or the way enlightened people perceives themselves and the world. So that's why we find it difficult, ordinary people find it difficult to grasp or to realize, to comprehend the teaching that are based on the absolute level of truth. And so that is why, but again, if there was a vast gap between the two truths, the two levels of teachings, and then the people would, the Buddha's followers, or whosoever interested in the Buddha's teaching, would not be able to comprehend his teaching. So that's why while he divided, while he put the realities into two different categories, conventional and absolute, at the same time, he incorporated teachings of absolute truth into the teachings of conventional truth as well, for the purpose of application. So the application at this point is, again, going back to those two approaches. What are the two approaches? Subjective approach and the objective approach. So any definition, any description of Dharma on the absolute level of teaching is based on the Buddha's objective approach, purely, or how to say, pure deconstructive, pure objective approach. Whereas his teachings of the that are based on the conventional level of reality, they are based on the subjective approach that the people would use. At the same time, while Buddha gives freedom to his followers to look at his teaching from a subjective approach, and then he encourages his followers to look at the same realities from the objective approach. So that's what he has done in all his teachings that are based on the conventional teachings. So and then another, so although he acknowledged the confusion generated by the tendency to attribute to early Buddhism something analogous absolute. Okay, I think we went through that. Okay, the prevailing view, however, is that such interpretations are tenuous. Indeed, later Buddhist traditions developed specific notions such as that of mind stream, life continuum mind, and repository consciousness, chitta sanyata, bhavanga chitta, ale vinyana. See, we come across those terms that we discussed. Now, the mind stream means chitta santana. Mind stream is the English translation of chitta santana. Santana is stream. And then life continuum mind, that is bhavanga chitta, that is the Buddhist counterpart of soul in theistic religions. And then the repository consciousness, or the storehouse consciousness, that is ale vinyana. So I think this is the first time we are coming across the term Chitta Santana here. We have used the Bhavanga Chitta and Ale Vijnana a lot. And take note of these three Pali terms and their corresponding translations. So the Chitta Santana is the mind stream, and Bhavanga Chitta is the life continuum mind, that is the subliminal mind. And the repository consciousness is, or storehouse consciousness is Ale Vijnana. Now, at this point, all these three terms represents a certain essence of selfhood. Now, certain essence of selfhood, and then when you say Buddha does accept a certain essence of selfhood, and then the next idea, the next thing that would occur to us is whether Chitta Santana, Bhavanga Chitta, and Ale Vijnana, or mind stream, life continuum mind, repository consciousness are same as soul or Atman. Now that is again, you see the fine line. In order to distinguish between Atman and subliminal consciousness, or this Chitta Santana, or so this life continuum mind. Probably I like this term, life continuum mind. That is subliminal consciousness. Life continuum means existence at this point, not the conventional life that we live here. Life means our existence, and there is something which has the role of a nucleus, like a center point, nucleus of our vast personal existence. That is Bhavanga. So life continuum mind, or Bhavanga Chitta here is the resembles Atman, soul in theistic religion. But again, the difference between soul in theistic religions and Bhavanga Chitta or Ale Vijnana, same thing. Right? Pali Buddhism uses Bhavanga Chitta, and Sanskrit Buddhism uses Ale Vijnana. So while Pali Buddhism is predominantly Theravada nowadays, but when you say Pali Buddhism, actually this is Prakrit. Pali is it's a kind of Prakrit language, and then so that most of the Prakrit language-based Buddhist schools are no longer existent. So that there are some other Buddhist traditions also who use Prakrit languages, Prakrit dialect that was very similar to Pali. For example, when Indian Emperor Ashoka's son, Arahan Mahinda, went to Sri Lanka with the message of Buddhism, the local king Devanampiritissa could very easily understand Mahinda, Arahan Mahinda's wordings. Why? Sinhalese is the only Prakrit language that has developed outside of mainland Indian subcontinent. So in the 6th century, 3rd century AD, Prakrit language, especially Pali, was the international language that was used by people from Indian subcontinent and then Southeast Asia. So, and then nowadays, whenever you see Theravada Buddhism, it is based on the Pali canon. But there are other schools as well that were based on Pali and similar Prakrit dialects. And when you say Sanskrit Buddhism here, Sanskrit Buddhism means, and then it says that some Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, Japanese, Korean Buddhism, and it's what's simply called the Mahayana Buddhism. So the earliest texts of the Mahayana Buddhism were written were available in Sanskrit language. So now, scholars prefer to call Theravada Pali Buddhism and Mahayana Sanskrit Buddhism because of the clear linguistic identity of those schools of Buddhism. So the cultural identity of Theravada Buddhism is very confusing. Why? Theravada Buddhism is practiced in Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Burma, and parts of Singapore and Malaysia as well. So when you go with the cultural identity of Theravada Buddhism, there's no single Buddhism called Theravada Buddhism, because Thai Buddhism is very different than Sri Lankan Buddhism. And Thai Buddhism is very different than Burmese Buddhism, because so that scholars prefer to go with the linguistic identity of schools of Buddhism rather than the cultural identity of Buddhism. So that's when in Mahayana Buddhism too, and there's a vast difference between Chinese Buddhism and Japanese Buddhism, or Korean Buddhism, or Tibetan Buddhism. So scholars would then go with the linguistic identity of Mahayana Buddhism. That's called Sanskrit Buddhism then. And there's another geographical identity of these two schools also. While some scholars call Mahayana Buddhism Northern Buddhism, and they call it Theravada Buddhism or Pali Buddhism Southern Buddhism. So that's the geographical identity of Buddhisms in plural. Anyway, now here probably, so I think please take note of these three Pali phrase terms: Chitta Sanyata, Chitta Santana, that is mind stream; Bhavanga Chitta, that is life continuum mind; and then repository consciousness or storehouse consciousness, that is Ale Vijnana, respectively. Precisely in order to avoid the metaphysical implications of the traditional notion of self. See, traditional notion of self. Extensive critiques of the attempt to find support in the canon literature for the existence of higher self, perhaps equated with consciousness, are found in Ward, A.K. Ward. A.K. Ward's book. I knew him personally, A.K. Ward. He's from Toronto, Canada, and he passed away like 20 years ago. Sorry, like 12 years ago. I used to visit A.K. Ward in his Toronto house. He was one of the, it was the last link of the early European scholars of Buddhism. And then Collins, 82, and Kalupahana. And then, so the Collins, I like Collins' writings as well. The Kalupahana is original from Sri Lanka. He was the professor of Buddhism at University of Hawaii. And he has written extensively on Mahayana Buddhism. And Peter Harvey is British, and he's British. I met him too. And De Silva, De Silva, he is a Sri Lankan. He lives currently he's retired, and he teaches at Monash University in Australia. Vasubandhu, treatise of negation of the person, Pudgala, Patiseda Prakarana. Now see, this is Vasubandhu. I think it was Vasubandhu is one of the earliest, he is among the first, the top 5 Mahayana scholars: Asanga, Vasubandhu, Nagarjuna. So they are the first 3. Yeah, Asanga, Vasubandhu, and how's that the other one? Nagarjuna. So Vasubandhu's treatise on the negation of the person, Pudgala Pratisedha Prakarana. Prakarana means the treatise or the book, compendium. Pudgala is the person. Pratisedha means rejection, negation. Meaning Vasubandhu's book, Master Vasubandhu, the great Mahayana scholar Vasubandhu's book on the negation of Pudgala, negation of personhood, negation of selfhood, which formed the 9th chapter of his Abhidharma Kosha, provides one of the most detailed Buddhist critiques for the personalist view, also targeting Brahminical conceptions of self. Now, I don't want to go any further of this one. Before that, I would like to ask if you any questions, because I would like to encourage you to just to go through this long article, just like you read a short story book or a novel, like a story book. Any questions? Okay, see, Peter Harvey does argues that the notion of self which witnesses, a self which witnesses, most probably refers to deeper aspects of consciousness, chitta, acting as conscience. So that self which witnesses. I like that phrase. Now, according to the absolute level of teaching, Upananda does not exist. Why? Because it is called a Pudgala negation. Negation of Pudgala or person also. And then at the same time, if I use the Buddha's own terms, there is no Upananda, but there are 5 aggregates. But at the same time, these aggregates, 5 aggregates together as a functional mechanism can bears witness to his own existence and to the existence of the external world. So that's why self which witnesses. So that's for the Harvey's arguments. The notion of a self which witnesses. Now, I like this term self which witnesses means it entails both definitions of selfhood. And when you say self which witnesses, that means the function. And at the same time, so it doesn't say individual. So that it also represents the higher level of, so the absolute level of teaching. Now, while, so that it is now based on the absolute level of truth, there is no Upananda, the individual. There are 5 aggregates. Do the 5 aggregates still feel like living or existing? Yes. The 5 aggregates do feel that they in plural, because they are the 5 components of myself. Yes, the 5 aggregates do feel that they are existing in one form, mean the Pudgala. So it's always, but for the sake of the application of the objective approach, in the case that you need to achieve nirvana, Buddha recommends the objective approach or the deconstructive approach. At the same time, so that he accepts the subjective approach that ordinary people do use. So that, and then according to Harvey, self which witnesses most probably refers to deeper aspects of consciousness. Chitta acting as conscience, chitta. Now, in a similar vein, Collins delineates several points supporting a no self-view as the correct account. 1, the metaphysical notion of a self, eternal and unchanging, is actually just plain erroneous, a defect of speculative opinion. 2, taking the body apart from experience. 5, a false sense of self may be acquired from the habitual use of pronominal forms such as I and mine. Forget about everything else, just think about this phrase. A false sense of self may be acquired from the habitual use of pronominal forms such as I and mine. Now, this statement encapsulates the entire teaching of the Buddha. So I would like to highlight that. A false sense of self may be acquired from the habitual use of pronominal forms such as I and mine. Now, do I exist? Yes, I do. Do I feel? Yes, I do. Do I make karma? Yes, I do. Am I intentional? Yes, I am intentional. I do have intentions. And then, so at that point, but still, in the eyes of the absolute truth, the kind of selfhood that I have, I identify myself in terms of self. It's me, this is mine. Now, conventionally, I do exist. But at the same time, I am fake. I don't actually exist. Why? Because I don't have a permanent substance. I don't have a permanent essence. no part of myself, no part of my individuality, no part of my persona can be taken as permanent. Even if there is some essence, that is essence is that mental continuum. So that what is that, the life continuum mind, or the subliminal mind, so that which is the counterpart of soul, Atman in theistic Buddhism. Even the so-called essence of my selfhood, which is the life continuum mind, which is subliminal continuum, or the life continuum mind, or subliminal conscious layer of consciousness, is not real by itself. Why? Because it is conditional too. Because our subliminal mind continues to get adulterated, adjusted, changed, transformed based on the new data, new experience of new layers of experience, new, I would say, new imprints that are added on top of, that are added to the subliminal consciousness. When the new imprints, whether karmic imprints, memory imprints, and the habitual imprints are so that made part of the subliminal mind, pavanga, or storehouse, or repository consciousness, and so that it can, those newly how to say planted, newly stored imprints can change the actual pattern, actual nature of the so-called essence of our selfhood. So at that point, even the so-called essence of our selfhood is not permanent, because it is simply so that in philosophical language, so in the eyes of enlightened ones, or in the eyes of the absolute level of teaching, so that I don't really exist. I do on the conventional level, but on the absolute level, my existence is fake. So that is why, but at the same time, enlightened people don't confuse the unenlightened ones. So that's why, even though last evening he told me that that there's no mountain, but at the same time this morning I went to the mountain with him, and when I said to him the mountain is beautiful, and then he nodded in agreement, yes, Upananda, the mountain is beautiful. Then I didn't like Buddha's answer personally. Why? Because I was confused as to why he said that there's no mountain last evening. This morning he told me there's a mountain, and he even accepted. He even approved my conclusion that mountain is formidable and beautiful. Then how could he say that there was no mountain? How could he call a non-existent mountain as beautiful and formidable? Now that's how absolute level of teachings can confuse unenlightened beings, people like me. So, but so that's why. But again, in philosophy, in philosophical arguments, so that it's a different approach that philosophers use. But always Buddha wanted his followers to use an applied approach. So that's why, once again, just to say that while he clearly distinguished between the two kinds of teachings, Neyat and Nitatta, teachings of the conventional reality, conventional truth, and teachings of the absolute truth, at the same time, he incorporated the essence of the absolute truth into his teachings of the conventional truth, because of which then, while he accepted the personhood, while he accepted that there is a person, there's a doer, there's an agent of karma, so that the karma agent can make the karma, so the karma can give the agent a rebirth. The karma can take the agent, the Pudgala, the individual, through different life forms in the samsara. At the same time, he said there's no, and yes, but at the same time there is no individual, there are 5 aggregates. So this is simply, so Buddha really wanted, he respected He respected my view, my opinion that I do exist. At the same time, that's why he nodded in agreement to my suggestion that the mountain is formidable and beautiful. But at the same time, he told me the mountain does not really exist, because the mountain does not have a true essence. It has a false essence. So my life, my subliminal consciousness, which is the essence of my selfhood, the essence of my existence, is still fake. Why? It doesn't have a true essence. It has a fake essence. Why? It changes based on the newly acquired, newly planted imprints of karma, memories, and habits. So that's why it is so the mental continuum or the life continuum, mind or bhavanga or suppository consciousness or ale vijnana doesn't have a true or permanent essence, because it is conditional. So it can get conditioned based on the data, based on the imprints. So the imprints can change the nature of the the essence of our selfhood. So, any questions? I'm just skipping. Now, last paragraph on page 3, the denial of a permanent self. Oh no, before that, I think, okay, consciousness, see Peter Harvey's idea. So, taking the body to be the self is a mistaken view. Consciousness itself is not the self. It is impossible to speak of a self apart from experience. That one we already discussed. You can talk about self for selfhood, or you and me and I and other person, me and other, my partner, without referring to experience. We always come up with a clear or vague idea of selfhood in light of experience. And a false sense of self may be acquired from the habitual use of pronominal forms such as I, and we did touch on that. Furthermore, in his detailed and thorough analysis of Buddhist and Brahminical views on personal identity, Ortke 1988 interprets the Not-Self Doctrine as reflective of a revisionary metaphysics which denies not a self as such, but rather the self as something qualified by the property of being the subject of experience, or as the let's skip OSK's idea, because I read some of his teachings, writings, and then language is very, he uses long sentences. You don't need to refer to this one. Now, next paragraph. The denial of a permanent self, as well as the refusal to treat persons as referring to anything real and permanent, forms an integral part of the Buddhist analysis of consciousness. Now, the denial of a permanent self, meaning no soul, as a refusal to treat persons as referring to anything real and permanent, it is the same idea further expressed, forms an integral part of the Buddhist analysis of consciousness. What is said here is that in order to, in analyzing consciousness, always Buddhism does use an deconstructive approach again. Deconstruct approach means so analysis of consciousness is not based on subjective approach, because it's very difficult to define consciousness based on the idea of personhood. So that's why Buddha divided how to separate it, to divided personhood into 5 areas called 5 aggregates. So always consciousness is understood in how the non-personalist terms. The frequent use of indexicals such as I, aham, and mine, mama, does not indicate that the Buddha accepts the conventional reality of persons either. See, the frequent use of indexicals such as I, aham, and mama, does not indicate that the Buddha accepts the conventional reality of person either. So even though Buddha uses them, that's the same fact that again we are coming back to, going back to. Now, Buddha, even in his conventional teachings, Buddha used non-personalist definition of self, just like he did in the Patipattana Sutta, just like he did in his description of the five aggregates. So that even if he says ahang, I, and then this is mine, it's me here, and this is mine. And then so even if he uses those terms, he doesn't approve the personalist idea or mean the true existence of a person or individuality. He simply uses the language of the conventional. He uses the conventional language. He first approves my idea that the mountain is truly existence. But at the same time, he denies that the mountain is truly existence, because the mountain does not contain a true essence. Mountain is made of causes and conditions. There's no universal, there's no, there's no permanent intact agent or reality called Atman or soul. Even so that it is conditionally arising. That's what you see in his teaching on interdependent origination. Interdependent nature of reality is, that's the relative nature of reality. Even the essence, even the very essence of our selfhood, that is repository consciousness of Ale Vijnana according to Sanskrit Mahayana Buddhism, or the life continuum mind or subliminal mind, which is Bhavanga according to Pali or Theravada Buddhism, Pali Buddhism. So that even the very essence is fake. Even the very essence is conditionally arising. It is made, it can go through adultery. It gets adulterated, it gets adjusted, it gets modified, it gets its power reduced, its ability increased, so that in the ultimate analysis of reality, there's nothing permanent left, no essence. And that is what we come across in the scientific theory, scientific analysis of the atom, right? You reduce it to, you break it into different areas, different particles, atomic particles, and again those atomic particles are again divided into subatomic particles and molecules and all that. And finally, when you reduce the smallest atomic particle, and then given any atomic particle that you reduce, and that is matter, so there's nothing left. So that even in the case of matter, there's nothing, no permanent essence left. And then of our feelings also, of our mental realities also, in the ultimate analysis of mind reality, mental realities, nothing permanent left, no essence left. Finally, you see the only reality that is left is called this one, tatha. Tatha means suchness. Tatha is suchness. Now, from among many synonyms, many alternative names for the Buddha himself preferred, he didn't have preference, but he did Tathagata. Tathagata is the most popular synonym for Buddha, Tathagata. Even Buddha called himself Tathagata. Now, Tathagata is defined. I didn't include the notion of Tathagata as a fundamental teaching of Buddhism, because It's not a teaching, but actually it's the Buddha. But so that see, Tathagata is literal translated as what it's called, thus gone one. Thus gone one. Tatha means Tataha. Tataha in Pali means thus. But actually, some scholars and I do not personally like this translation, because Tatha here is not a preposition. Tatha means thus. It's not a preposition. But some in Buddhist canons also. I personally don't like that, because I had some argument, philosophical debates with even my teachers, and then so that what I perceive is Tatha. What is Tatha? Tatha is nothingness. Tatha is nothingness. When you describe a reality, for example, when you say, now, nothingness as a term is wrong. Why? You cannot use ness, suffix ness, with nothing. So that when you say nothingness, emptiness, you have again countered. You have gone back to, how to say, the conventional existence of realities. Suffix ness implies something that is truly existence. And instead, we use in Buddhist philosophical language like this, like my smartphone is such that it is the best. My hunger is such that it is the most terrible. And so that my accent is such that no one can understand it. Now my computer is such that it always crashes. See the whole description of suchness? That's what Tatha means. So you can describe realities, but it's always, according to Buddhism, it is very difficult to describe a reality in one word, with one word. Always is a phrase that you use, and Buddha has also used lots of phrases. Now, Tathagata means the one who has seen suchness of realities. Suchness. What is called suchness? But again, ness is wrong. But sorry, but that's the language. I can describe sunyata without calling it emptiness, or even sunyata. Ta is ness. A prefix ta in Pali and Sanskrit means, so it is suffix ta is ness in English. So you could say the proper way of explaining realities is that how my telephone is such that it is not truly existence. My body is such that I can feel it. At the same time, it's non-existent. So always Tatha means the original nature of realities, any realities. So what is the original reality of original nature of things? It is shunya, empty. Things are empty of an essence, empty of substance. So that any reality is unsubstantiated. You can substantiate realities. Conventionally, realities have a substance, whereas on the absolute level, things don't have a substance. Things don't have an essence. Because of why? Because of the relativity. Now, we don't see the relativity. We see the wholeness of things. We see things in their entirety. We don't. So the relativity is not manifest to our naked eyes when we look at a visual object. And then when we hear a piece of music, and so that we don't see the relativity of that music. We see music as a whole, as something uniform, something intact. When I taste food, I don't see the relativity of food. Instead, I see food as a whole, as a reality that is intact. And then when my skin touches something, I don't see the relativity of the tangible things, that whatever tangible that my skin is touching. I don't even see so that the relative nature of my sense organs. It is not only the sense objects that are relative, but also the very sense organs, sense faculties that we use that are relative. So my selfhood is relative. So are the things that I experience with my sense organs, that is experience. So that because I am relative, I am a relative reality, and so are the sense objects that I experience, that I perceive through my sense organs, that are also relative. So when selfhood is relative, it doesn't have a permanent essence. And things that I perceive that don't have a permanent essence because they are also relative. Then needless to say, the end product or the outcome is my experience. Even my experience is relative. So experience is not permanent either. Experience doesn't have. So that's when the Buddha says elsewhere, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch with your skin, so that are not real. How can they be real when the very agent or the sense organs are not real? Everything is relative to each other. Something is relative to something else. When the relativity falls apart, when the conditions of relativity falls apart, there is nothing existence, and everything is nominal. There is a name. You can simply see things as nominal. It's not actual. It's not actually something material. So that being there are 10 minutes. I would have the last 10 minutes open for questions. So next week, by the way, I will email you. Okay, Lisa, yes. The mountain doesn't exist because of lacking of the essence of existence. The mountain exists the existence of mountain, it consists of many elements such as trees, plants. So yeah, those are the conditions. Yeah, correct. Yes, you are correct. Yeah. So yeah, actually, even it's much easier for us. We don't need in-depth psychological or philosophical knowledge of Buddhism or realities to define, understand. Yeah. Still, conventionally, you can this call. Thanks, Lisa, because I'm just referring to your statement. Yeah, you can conventionally reconstruct a certain objects and see. Conventional reconstruction of reality, not the absolute reconstruction of reality. So the conventional deconstruction of reality, just like Lisa says here, that the mountain is made of trees, plants, elevation of hard and elevation, hard formation, vertical formation of soil, and different things together, and then at the same time we attribute a name. If we were if our ancestors call a mountain table, today we would say, okay, table Everest is the highest table. And if our ancestors call table a mountain, and I would say, okay, I am having a square rectangular table in my living room, or I have a round mountain. So that it's a rectangular mountain. So yes, that's fascinating statement. And then we natural formations and the man-made or nature-made things are those are conventional realities. And at the same time, we can conventionally reconstruct those realities and understand the relative nature of them, just like the mountain. And at the same time, and also the name that we attribute. Trees and plants and vertically elevated soil, hard rock formations or soil formations is an object. It is, and then we call it the mountain. And then you can deconstruct, and also you can deconceptualize. That's what Buddha does in terms of deconstruction, deconceptualize. But why we conceptualize? Because of our subjective nature. We have subjective approach. Our perception is subjective. So that's why we call emptiness or nothingness. But actually, instead of calling it in nothingness or emptiness, it is more correct to use a whole phrase like mountain is such that it is made of few things. A mountain is like we use the suchness. Suchness at this point means the conditional nature of anything. But that is what Buddha sees. And Buddha sees that suchness to the deepest extent. So that instead of seeing an essence of in realities, he sees the suchness of everything. Hence, he is the Tathagata, who has realized suchness of realities. That's what Tathagata means. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, George, yeah. Have heard Tathagata translate as I am like this, I am thus, I am such. That's great. Yeah, that's what my personal interpretation too. Because in a philosophical conference in '98 in Singapore, and there was some debates as to what Tathagata would mean. My argument was that Tathagata is that thus is not thus gone one or thus come one, because at that point tata is a preposition, thus gone one or thus come one, because gata means gone. Tata, how? Thus. He's gone thus. How? Or tata agata again, maybe. Agata means come. Thus come. Then what's the point of calling thus? And explain thus to me. And then so that actually it is suchness. Thus. So that but if you say as George says, I am thus, and then you have and that requires further it requires further clarification. So that is why that's why, but the literal translation, some scholars, the traditional translation is thus gone one, thus come one, but it is the suchness. Tathagata is such that he knows. Tathagata is such that he knows that things don't have an essence. So any last questions? So Bhante artist, let me read that. I know everyone is seeing Lisa's post, but let me read that out. Bhante artist, 5 questions for the final exams. Sorry, but I can't say no, yes or no. Which one is that? Give a brief introduction to what led to the origin of polytheism and monotheism in India. Write a comprehensive, or you are talking about the previous coursework, write a comprehensive description of the difference between karma and Brahmanism and Buddhism. The Upanishadic period marked a turning point in the Indian religious history. Explain. Compare and contrast the idea of nirvana in Buddhism and non-Buddhist, Brahminical and samsaric, Shramanic religious thought. Number 5, compare Buddhist and Brahminical. Yeah, that's right. See, these were the homework essay questions, right? What did I say to you about these questions that we discussed this morning? You see some mild smile across my face. What did I tell you about the questions today? I kindly ask you to start formulating answers, start answering the sample questions that we discussed today, yesterday and today, because why? You may, how to say, you may see them again in mock exams and final exams. That's the same thing I would like to say. These 5, remember, first I asked you to give these 5 questions as homework, but then I said, you don't have to do homework, I mean assignments for this simply, but personally study these questions and answer these questions. Yes, please answer those questions as well. And that would help you to, of course, there's no more, that would help you to successfully answer the final exam of the, these 4 homework essay questions. Yes, Toshita. And then look at these homework questions the way that you look at those sample questions that we discussed yesterday and today, right? So that you got the point here, right? You know, when I answer certain questions, there are certain limits, right? I have to use politically correct or ethically correct terms. To certain questions that you ask me, I can't say yes or no. Instead, I would like to say, okay, you may see these questions somewhere else, and please prepare to answer these questions. But anyway, in a few days' time, I will email you these sample questions again. These sample questions that we discussed yesterday and today, and the sample questions, or also as Toshita says, those homework questions again in the same document. I will include the 2 lists of questions in the same document, Word document, and then I will send it to via email, right? And so that please start answering these questions, because these sample questions represents the core or the heart of this coursework. You might have noticed that we discussed things more at length during the previous coursework, the introduction to history of Buddhism. So it was basically history, and we discussed how the contemporary religious thoughts. Whereas in this coursework, now this fundamental teachings of Buddhism, now that there are only 4 or 5 fundamental teachings, and then also these are very highly philosophical, I purposely reduced the length, reduced the gravity or the heaviness of this coursework here, because otherwise it's too much, even though it's not as much as that we discussed during the previous coursework, and you need more attention to you require more attention, pay more attention to this course on fundamental teachings of Buddhism, because you can simply easily formulate answers for for the question for the previous coursework, Introduction to History of Buddhism. Here is more highly philosophical. So I will send you sample questions in 1 Word document in few days. But at the same time, until you get that, please work day and night, despite your own busy life, work day and night on answering these sample questions. Thank you, and I wish you all the best. And you got my phone number in case you need to personally discuss anything about the sample questions or anything missing, because I purposely avoided using Buddhist terms, Pali terms, and certain other areas of fundamental teaching. I only included the fundamental or the essential areas of the fundamental teachings of Buddhism. There are other things as well, but I never wanted to overburden you, because the purpose of this coursework is just to understand the mainstream fundamental teachings of Buddhism. So that's why at times you felt like I was giving a sermon. That's why I told you yesterday, right? So that it could have been, I could have done that in a purely academic terminology, but I never want to do that, because this is a diploma course. At the same time, we should be able to walk away with some clear-cut understanding of the fundamental teachings of Buddhism, as well of the previous coursework, what paved the way, the historical milieu, the historical background of Buddhism. That's only what we need, actually. Thank you so much, everyone. And then see you next month. And please get back to me anytime. Thank you so much. Yes, actually, I feel tired. Maybe I need to clean my kitchen. I do to clean up. I couldn't do that yesterday. Lots of garbage. And then so that afterwards I will take a break. And then please feel free me to. I would always prefer to discuss things over the phone. Thank you, Teruvan Saranai Toshita. Thank you, Toshita. Thank you, everyone. I see everyone's greetings and blessings. I will simply thank you all. And then please work on your assignments. I mean, this question, your questions, answers. And then please call me. I would prefer phone calls over text messages and how to say text messages or email, because I can explain things right away rather than taking time to type everything, right? Pardon my rejection. I'm not refusing that. But well, when we talk to each other over the phone, we can discuss more easily, and it's very easy. Okay. And everyone got my phone number, right? Oral tradition. Yes, Josh. Yeah, oral tradition. Yeah. So you got my phone number, 323-443-4040. And I guarantee that walk away with the best grade for both coursework. Always my way of teaching is, I have taught in different academic institutions. I never want to play tricks on. I mean, I never want to overburden my students. Of course, I always wanted my people, my students, or whosoever studies with me, shares with me, or learns with me, or learn from me, or learn with. I am reluctant to say learning from me. I always say learning with me, because I learn a lot from you. I always like to, how to say, only to get some clear ideas of the lessons that we learn. And at the same time, I would also hint at what you would be getting on the exam test paper, right? It doesn't matter. So what matters is that we get some clear-cut understanding at the same time. And then I should not, how to say, put you in trouble by not disclosing, but giving you hard questions in the exam. Why? What matters is not the exam, actually, but the knowledge that you get prior to exams. That's more important. But fortunately or unfortunately, conventionally in academia, so that teachers, instructors want to test whether you have actually learned something. If there's a way, I don't know who invented exams. But anyway, thank you so much. Wish you a beautiful, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Wish you peace. And then please get back to me whenever you want. But after 8 o'clock, I would like to I would like you to call me after 8:30 actually. Between 8:30 and 11:30 or midnight, 12. Thank you so much. Teruvan Saranai, Toshita, and Buddha bless you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.